Hello, my name is Bill Edgin. Tonight I don't have any guests lined up, so I am going to talk about a term that's used quite a bit in family courts. That is the best interest of the child. Now, that is a great idea for courts to try to make decisions that are in the best interest of the child, and that's how it should be done. The problem is you have these judges who deal with law and try to do things according to the rules of court, the rules of evidence, the law, and it's an adversarial system, and they believe there's another side to every argument. And uh, I'll just recount a couple of experiences I've had with the last two judges that I spoke with related to um, this same subject, best interest of the child. Today, for example, I just spoke with a judge, and well, he was informing me about the different rules for courts and different levels of information required to make decisions. He also said when it comes to family court situations, all those rules and everything else go out the window, and all decisions are made in the best interest of the children. Now, here's the problem with that. You have judges who know the law and know the law very well, but without having seen the children, talked to the children, met the children, know anything about the children or anyone in their life, are making decisions based on information provided to them by two parties. And if one of the parties is an alienator or an abuser, they're making most of their decisions based on lies. The other party would be telling the truth and providing factual information. But because the alienator has already began this process, they go out and align other agencies and people with them, such as the police, child protection, RCMP, uh, anyone else who will listen to their story and side with them and provide them documentation that supports the narrative they're trying to create. So the judges will look at this information. They will see corroborating statements from police, child protection, maybe therapists who have spent a session with one party without ever seeing the children of the other party to be able to make a proper diagnosis. And they see a consistent pattern of this one story. That's all it is a story. These are lies. The lies are told to one party. The party they tell it to write it down. Then they submit it to the court. Now the court has 3 or 4 sets of paperwork that match. And they look at this and they say, oh, this is evidence, because it's all consistent and it's the same thing. So this, to them, makes them believe that this is credible, and this is not a single source. This is 3, 4 different sources providing the same information. But they still haven't determined whether or not that information is valid and correct. They're making assumptions that this evidence is correct, that the people investigating the allegations that were made to them did their job, conducted a thorough investigation instead of just taking down the information they were told by a party lying to them. That's how these alienators, abusers, get to create the status quo in courts, where it's so hard for the targeted parent or parent who's being truthful and trying to be honest and share factual information to be disregarded and ignored. Also, if the child is being abused through this process, or one of the parents is suffering abuse throughout this process. I just watched a clip of Dr. Gabor Mate today, where he says the uh, the the term ADHD and adult diagnosis isn't from a mental health disorder, or it's from a genetic trait that's been inherited. It's because the child grew up with a parent who was suffering from trauma, and this trauma affected that child. The child was unable to cope with this trauma because they had not fully developed, and this is what breaks down their development, the normal growth and development of children, where they kind of become numb and kind of tune out to things that are going on because they don't know how to cope or deal with it. It's part of the fight or flight response to trauma or something that causes them to be fearful. And because they are unable to escape the situation because they're a child and they're with their parent, and what is happening to their parent is also affecting them. They can't escape, so they tune out. This becomes a coping mechanism for children. And when they grow up, becomes what Dr. Gabor Mate refers to as a failed coping mechanism, where people are now being misdiagnosed with ADHD. They're not suffering from ADHD. It's a failed coping mechanism. They never learned to develop properly in the family unit from their parents because one parent was traumatized, and that trauma the parent was being subjected to affected their growth and development. This is where the judges and the courts fail to recognize these behaviors. They are trying to make decisions based on paper without ever, such as in my case, no judge has ever spoken to my children. Yet they assume my children are afraid of me and don't want to be with me. And they keep talking like, we're going to do this investigation and make decisions from a child-based perspective and do things in their best interest. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's great. It's probably not the best for a court to go in and make decisions on what children want because they might want to have sugar for bedtime every night, or well, they don't want to have bedtime, they just want to stay up every night and not go to school. So that's why parents usually have these decision making abilities for children. And I've had a judge specifically say to me that we're going to make decisions based on their opinions, which is fine because the courts have been told that my children fear me. They fear my parents, they fear my family, and have nothing good to say about me, which is not true. In fact, I'm just going to step away for a moment. I got a Christmas present. They have a picture frame, and I'd like to share the picture that I got for Father's Day this year. Just be right back. Sorry for. Okay. Now this here. Sorry, I'm trying to get it so that see it well. This was the picture. This was my present for Father's Day this year, and I finally got a very nice picture frame for this picture, and have it up. And in the picture, both my daughters depicted both her and I smiling, her with her arm around me and her fingers. It's not a picture that one person or any person, I believe, would look at it and believe the child is terrified to be with me. Yet this is how the situation has been depicted to the judges in the court, and along with all the paperwork and the story to corroborate that lends credibility to the story that was told, because all they did was take reports without doing any investigation. And that's another part of the problem. When an abuser makes reports to the police, any false reports that are made to the police that lead to an ongoing investigation is a violation of Section 140 of the Criminal Code of Canada. It's called public mischief. So while I've made numerous reports to different police and agencies that public mischief had taken place, that has been documented by the courts, by everyone involved in this situation, the police, the St. John Police Department, failed to take any reports from me. And they said, well, we'll add this information to the file that we already created. So the St. John Police were already investigating me on false allegations, and all they had in their reports was the information she had provided them. And when I made statements to them or provided them evidence that contradicted the statements that were made, they didn't include it in the reports, because I have those reports under the Right to Information and Protection of Privacy Act. So those reports end up stacking up in court against you. And while alleged criminal activity is not supposed to influence family courts, it does every day. It's caused me to lose custody of my children. I was afforded no presumption of innocence, and my custody and access schedule was varied on numerous occasions because of false reports. Now, when a child is growing up and used to having full access to both parents, suddenly being denied access to one parent is a traumatic situation, especially after a divorce. The divorce will be hard enough on the children, and the children need supports to make it through this traumatic situation. And they need love and understanding to help them, because this will be a very difficult time and process for them. It was a very difficult time and process for me, and I'm an adult, and I'm still trying to recover from the process years later. So this has indeed affected my children, and it does affect children that have parents separate. Then once the courts step in and award custody or access to one party over the other, they're again being denied access to one party, which helps an abuser further isolate the children from a loving parent, which would be helpful and beneficial to their growth and development. As Gabor Mate had stated, the adult diagnosis of ADHD isn't from genetics. It's from a failed coping mechanism that was created at a young age to deal with the trauma and stress they were being subjected to. So I've had two judges specifically say, we know what's in the best interest of the children. And I don't think they can even define what's in the best interest of the children, because you'd need a specialist like a Dr. Gabor Mate, Amy Baker, Dr. Stephen Miller, a professional that knows about family attachments, trauma. The growth and development is dependent on the parents. And you deny children those parents, and one parent is being attacked or abused by the other, the child also suffers that abuse. And this is where Gabor Mate says a fight or flight instinct is not possible for the child. So they just learn to tune out, and that's their coping mechanism at a young age. As they get older, it no longer works. It doesn't help them resolve issues, and that's one of the things they need to learn is conflict resolution. And seeing two parents that cannot resolve conflict is not a good model for them to see, or to try to move forward in their life, to try and be a part of society. And judges are completely and completely oblivious to all these types of understanding about this pathology or how it affects the children, because they're making all their decisions based on the law. And the law does nothing other than recognize professional assessments of diagnosis. While I'm not a professional, I can study the work of professionals. I can understand it. I can recognize what is happening in my situation, and I can try to do something to help my situation. And that's what I've done. And I've been very fortunate to maintain a good, healthy relationship with my children. And again, I think if anyone takes a look at that picture, they would also believe that there's a good, healthy relationship between father and daughter. Um, that's what it says to me when I see it. Uh, Friends. And I'm not just a friend. I try to be a good role model and try to provide her with good information on how to be a good person when she grows up, so she can think independently and make decisions for herself. And also the same for my son. When children are exposed to a toxic situation such as a divorce, it really does slow down their development or break their development, and they fail to develop proper attachment bonds. The courts don't see this. I've mentioned this to judges repeatedly, and they keep saying, well, you're not a doctor. I said, yeah, you're right. I'm not a doctor, but neither are you. So something needs to happen to determine whether or not what I'm saying is true. Because everything I'm saying could be true, and the children could be being abused in this situation. And they look at me like I'm an alien, and they're a judge, and they're quite superior to me, and I have no idea what I'm talking about. I am very well educated in the pathology of parental alienation and different aspects and behaviors related to alienation and how this affects the growth and development of children. The judges are not, because they've never studied it. They study the law. So I'm being forced to try to study the law, represent myself, with these judges speaking to me as if they're all knowing and everything they're doing is in the best interest of the children, and they couldn't even define it if they tried. They just keep repeating the term because they've already decided and made a decision on who they believe in this matter, and it was not me. And this is why we continue to go down this road. I've made numerous applications and motions to the court, and they've been called vexatious in nature, that I'm trying to delay proceedings or I'm trying to incur costs for the other party, which is not true. None of my applications or motions have been dealt with, so they have not yet been determined to be vexatious or without merit. They are just labeling that and saying that for years without dealing with them. So again, they're trying to lay a foundation to discredit me and discredit the information I am presenting. So they already are creating doubt about what I'm presenting because they're already predisposed to believing that anything I present is not true and is vexatious in nature. So as soon as any judge that I've been in front of makes that statement, they're already showing their bias. So all I can do is appeal the decisions based on bias like that. And when they say things like that, it's very biased because none of my applications or motions have been deemed vexatious or without merit. And I'm still waiting to have a trial on many such items. Best interest of the child is a noble thought, and it is a good basis. But for that to work, judges need to understand or have an expert come in and assess the situation prior to them trying to apply legal standards to a situation that requires a medical diagnosis. If you have cancer or if you have a brain aneurysm, you don't go to the nurse to try and get help. You go to an expert in that field. And when children are being abused psychologically, emotionally, neglected, or they are unable to cope with the trauma that their parents are going through, they're in an abusive situation. And this needs to be recognized, and things need to be put in place to protect them. That's what's in their best interest. Not removing them from a parent while these other people investigate these allegations. And then if the allegations are proven false, well, we'll just return things the way they were, and we'll not hold this other party responsible for making false allegations, which is a criminal offense, which led to all these court proceedings and the involvement of the police and child protection and these other agencies. So the party, for making false reports, they got rewarded with sole custody of the children for a portion of the time. Why not do it again? It worked the last time. Also, when you tie in custody to child support, if the party was awarded sole custody, that would end up meaning more money for them in child support. So there are other factors that would give more control to one party over the other. And the party looking to control the situation is the abusive party. They're the ones trying to justify and give the court reason to give them full control over this situation. And they will continue to do that because why not? It's already partially worked in the past. I've made false reports. They were arrested. They had to go to court. They had to hire a lawyer. They had to pay money. They're depleted of funds. They had to sell their home to fight this. Why don't I make some more reports? Because the more reports I make, the more damage and chaos it causes. And the courts fail to recognize this pattern of criminal behavior. And that's what it is. It's a pattern of criminal behavior. Dr. Jennifer Jill Herman refers to this type of behavior as domestic terrorism. She's getting rid of the term domestic violence and calling it domestic terrorism because that's how these people behave. They threaten you. You need to do as I say, otherwise you're not going to see your child again. You need to stop asking for your children or I'll call the police and say you're threatening me and harassing me. Do not come to my house and pick up the children or I'll have you arrested. Parents that are struggling or looking to see their children, this is so traumatic for them because then they can call the police. I have videos where a father has gone to the police station to report the fact that his children were being kept from him in contravention of a court order. And the police officer told him that if he didn't leave, he would be arrested. The gentleman asked him for what? He said, I don't know, I'll make something up. Get out of here. It's a very, very abusive process where people don't know how to handle these situations. Part of the reason they don't know how to handle these situations is because there's an 80% overlap in the behaviors of a person suffering from trauma who would be the victim of abuse and a person who suffers from borderline personality disorder such as Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer, his main diagnosis was borderline personality disorder. He wasn't a psychopath. He was borderline. That was his main diagnosis. And trying to come to a reasonable agreement with one of these parties is almost impossible, if not impossible, because they need to control everything, and it has to be their way. And if it's not their way, well, then they can get violent and they can hurt people. And Jeffrey Dahmer, with his new documentary out, if you see how he grew up, the family environment, you can see that that's the type of environment where a person could grow up that would suffer from either narcissistic or borderline personality disorder. And when you separate the children and they're unable to deal with this, and they have a parent that's unable to deal with this, that's where they develop this coping mechanism that doesn't help them. And when they're questioned by therapists or social workers or judges or lawyers, they may not provide good information because, again, they're in a situation they don't know how to cope. They don't have proper coping mechanisms, and instead they will shut down. This, while it may not be too damaging to them at a young age, it will be very difficult for them to move through the workplace in a job with the inability to resolve conflict. They will get stuck in a loop where they just keep repeating the pattern over and over again. And if they do go to seek help, Dr. Gabor Mate, as he said, that they will most likely be diagnosed with ADHD, which is not what the real problem is. The real problem is they had a coping mechanism that they developed at a young age, and they still don't know how to cope with stress or difficult situations, so they tune out. And that's why they're getting diagnosed with the ADHD. Judges don't realize this. They can't tell if a child is zoning out or if that has been the pattern or process for years. And if a child is being abused, most likely they won't speak out against the abuser because they'll be further abused. And they know if they keep quiet and don't say anything, they'll be rewarded. So they're being conditioned, and love and affection is doled out based on their behavior. If you have a loving parent who gives love unconditionally, the child will feel safe and loved no matter what they do. But if you have a parent who treats them as if they will not be given affection unless they follow the rules, or if they do this, if you don't have your room cleaned up, you're gonna be staying in your room until it's clean. And that's great. Rules need to be set, guidelines need to be set, boundaries need to be set, and they also need to be respected. Problem is, if the person trying to tell them you need to keep these boundaries, you need to do this, you need to do that, and they see the person telling them what to do and not displaying the same behaviors, they recognize that, well, you're saying I have to follow these rules, but you're not, so I'm not going to either. And that's where the children learn these narcissistic or borderline behaviors, because they observe them and they see what a parent is doing. And this is where they start to develop their pathology. And the judges who are making what they term and believe are decisions in the best interest of the children have never even consulted or spoken with them. That's what's going on with my case. No judge has spoken with my children. They're making assumptions based on the false statements made by a party, the false statements that were passed on to another party that was added to the file, the false statements that was passed on. The 4 different agencies have passed on false information to the family court based on false reports made by my ex. St. John Police Department, the RCMP, Child Protection, and therapists. All of this paperwork has added up, and no one has taken any of my information down, and they're not making decisions based on the best interest of the child. They're making decisions based on a story that was created by one parent against the other. They have no way of determining which party is true. So they try to rely on the rules of court and rules of evidence and corroborating statements by other parties to determine how they're going to make a judgment. So they're not making judgments based on the best interest of the children. They're making judgments based on the falsified documents and reports that are in front of them. And they believe they're doing what's in the best interest of the child. In high conflict cases of divorce, what they're doing is they're leaving children with the abusive parent, which is going to have a long-term negative effect on their growth and development in their whole life. They will grow up following the same patterns of abuse with their family as they grew up in, because they will see that as the norm. They will see that as the standard by which families deal with one another. And it is so wrong. There is never a good reason to be mean, hurtful to anyone else. We should all work together and support one another, be a community, be a family. Even if you're not a family, you support your neighbors, you support your friends. Judges are supposed to be there to protect the children. They don't recognize what's in the best interest of the children, and they don't know how to protect them. But they keep saying they do everything in that best interest, and it's just a line. They need help determining what is in the best interest of the children, because they're so arrogant they believe that they can use the law to make these determinations without consulting with a medical professional or listening to the information of a party and the medical evidence they provide to the court. To give you an example, a friend of mine hired one of the leading experts in the world in the field of parental alienation. He made a 72-page report outlining the children of the two parents in this family were suffering from a severe case of parental alienation. And the behavior of the mother was turning the children and teaching them sociopathic behavior. This 72-page report by a world-leading expert was provided to the courts, and the judge chose to disregard this medical diagnosis from a medical professional who has worked in this field, has testified in Canada as an expert witness. She wouldn't allow the report into the family court file, stating her reason for not allowing this professional medical report into the case file was because it didn't coincide with her previous decisions. So this judge, again, showed bias because she's not a medical professional, and a medical professional report was provided to her with a diagnosis of child abuse. And she chose to not let it in as evidence because it didn't coincide with her previous decision. That doesn't matter what her previous decision was. That makes it new evidence. That makes it evidence that she needed to look at and review her previous decision to determine whether or not she made the right decision in that case and the decision she made, but instead chose to ignore this 72-page professional report from a world-leading expert and chose to leave the children in this family with the abusive party that was identified. This is what is so wrong with the system. Judges have no idea what the best interest of the child is or how to determine it. And they keep trying to use legal arguments to say, I'm doing things in the best interest of the child. They need medical professionals in there to give their opinions and decisions. And medical opinions and decisions aren't just like, well, he fell down and he sprained his ankle, could have torn a muscle. When you have a diagnosis of child psychological abuse, that's like saying this person has cancer. They have cancer. It's a diagnosis. And with a diagnosis, there is a treatment plan that needs to be implemented to help the person from what they are suffering from. And instead of this judge ordering help for these children that are suffering from severe alienation and abuse, she chose to not even let it in as evidence because she already made a decision on this matter and the report didn't coincide with her decision. So that's a violation of the rules of court. That's an appealable decision. Now, it's a shame that that party has to appeal that decision because the judge was so arrogant and ignorant that they're just going to dismiss this report from a medical professional who can make decisions in the best interest of the children based on their mental health and wellness. Instead, it was just disregarded by the judge because it didn't coincide with her beliefs and her thoughts. She's not a medical professional. She has to defer to the professional's assessment and make decisions based on it. Instead, the decision was made to leave the children with abusive party. And that's what's wrong with the system. There's no accountability. The judges, they make a decision, and according to Dr. Stephen Miller, in cases of high conflict, they make the wrong decision 95% of the time. 95% of the time. They don't just get them wrong once or twice. And the high conflict cases is a small percentage. It could be anywhere from 2% in New Brunswick to 12 or 15% in Ontario. Could be even higher now. It might be even up to be 17. It was a standard of about 5% across Canada, but again, these numbers are changing as more and more people are recognizing these high conflict divorces. And the new Divorce Act came out March 1st, 2021, even put in some verbiage to recognize coercive and controlling behaviors as a form of family violence to help try to recognize these patterns of behavior quicker and make decisions sooner based on the best interest of the children instead of leaving them in these abusive situations. That currently is still not in effect. Judges aren't educated on this matter. They're educated on the law. And they're not educated on what's in the best interest of the children or any of these pathologies. And then they need someone to come in here, a parental assessor, like they do in Ontario, I believe in Vancouver, other parts of Canada, where an assessor who is able to go in and determine between the two parents which one's an abuser, which one's the victim of abuse, and what kind of effects it's having on the children. And then they supply a report to the judge to help him make his decision for custody and access in this situation. Like I said, I know a party who paid a lot of money to have this professional report by one of the leading experts in the world. And instead of the judge making a decision based on it, they ignored it because it didn't coincide with what they believed. That's not making decisions based on evidence. That's making decisions based on bias. And that's exactly what that judge wrote. I am not allowing this information in because the information contained within this report does not coincide with my previous decision. The judge is acknowledging the fact that this report doesn't coincide with her decision. This is a medical report. She's not qualified to make a decision on a medical report. She would have to defer to it, make decisions based on it. Instead, she's rejecting it without any ability to do so. The only reason she's rejecting it is because it states that she's wrong. Until people start actually acknowledging that they don't know what is in the best interest of the child in some of these cases, that they need help in understanding what's in the best interest of the child, they will usually make things worse. According to Dr. Stephen Miller, 95% of the time, they make the wrong decisions and they make these situations worse. The sooner these situations get recognized and diagnosed, the more likely people, families, and children will have to recover from the trauma of the situation, be able to move forward and develop normally. And that's what needs to happen because these cases are being drawn out. My case has been drawn out over 7 years now. I still haven't had a trial, even though I've been making applications and motions. And my applications and motions keep getting listed as vexatious and without merit, yet none of them have been dealt with. So how can it be determined prior to reviewing any of the information in my applications and motions to say that this is vexatious or without merit? Again, they're coming to a predetermined decision of my actions, my appeals, my reports, and already assuming that it is vexatious in nature and has nothing relevant. And that shows the bias of the courts, which is why I will continue to make appeals on their decisions, because I can show they went into the court with a preconceived notion that the information was vexatious when they had not even yet reviewed it. This is the pattern that I've been going through. This is a pattern that I've witnessed. And again, when dealing with police and you try to report that you are the victim of false reports because you're being investigated for criminal offenses, make sure you get a file number associated with your complaint under Section 140 of the Criminal Code, because most likely you're being investigated under a recognizance or a different section of the Criminal Code or criminal harassment. And if they say, well, we'll just add this to their file, they're not adding anything. They've been told a story that's against you. The information you provide them doesn't coincide with the information they were told, so they're going to disregard it. All they're looking for is evidence to corroborate the story they were told so they can pass it on to the Crown. It's a terrible process. I've learned to document it, and I have many documents for my own case, and I have many other parties that have documented their cases. And in fact, there's a gentleman here in St. John who was served a summons by a St. John police officer. And I sent a copy of that summons to the Attorney General of the Province of New Brunswick, Andrea Anderson Mason, stating that the St. John police officer is interfering with the custody and access of this parent. They don't have the right to do that. And when this gentleman did end up in court, which was just a month or so ago, the police officer who issued him the summons lied about providing him with that summons. Now, I still had my copy that he had provided to me, and I also had the copy that I'd sent to Andrea Anderson Mason. So a St. John police officer perjured herself in testimony in St. John, and the person she was testifying against, he is now facing criminal charges based on her perjured testimony. And I hope to keep covering this case because the officer testified under oath at trial that she never issued a summons to this gentleman or interfered with his ability to see his daughter. When I have a copy of the summons she issued to this father stating and doing just that. So again, he's going to need to file an appeal because the judgment against him was made based on falsified information, misleading information. And he's got the documents to prove it. So I will try to keep documenting my case and best interest of the child. That's how we want to do things. That's how we want decisions to be made. But currently, lawyers and judges, they don't know how to do that. They're still trying to make best interest of the child decisions based on the law when they need to do it based on the growth and development and an environment the children are growing up in that is healthy. And if one party is abusing the other party with the help of the police, child protection, the courts, the judges, that is going to negatively impact one parent, which is also going to negatively impact the child. Now you have a number of people working together to collectively abuse you and your children. And that is the process that is currently in place. And until they recognize that they're complicit in this abuse by aligning with the alienator and abuser, it's going to continue to happen because that's what's been happening for years. I hope to have some examples of how this goes on and provide some court documents to show how this happens. Because if you've never gone through the process or seen these behaviors happen before, it's almost impossible to believe. And it's a shame because while the judges keep saying they're doing things in the best interest of the children, they're not even consulting with the children. They don't know what the children want. They don't know how the children are. They're being told a fearful story by a liar. And that's what's guiding them to make their decisions, because all they can think of is, well, if even part of these lies or even part of the story that I'm being told is true, then I got to protect those children. And instead, they will most likely remove children from a loving, caring, protective environment and place them with an abuser because they don't recognize the difference. So I just thought I'd come on and speak about best interest of the child, judges, their failures tonight, and hopefully I have some more good examples. Hopefully I'll have a friend with me next week who will help me discuss these issues and maybe even see the report from the professional that was disregarded by the courts that shows the abuse his children are suffering from, and no one is helping. That is so wrong. We need to help these children. Children are the ones that need help. But the judges aren't asking them what they need or talking to them. They're just taking the reports from all their friends, and they're all saying the same thing. Well, we believe he's the party that's the problem, or she's the party that's the problem, and they gang up on them. It's like they're schoolyard bullies, and they all trap you in there. In the locker room, let's say the court is the locker room, so now they've got you trapped, and they get to control everything in there. And that's the reality of how it is in court when you're going there and asking for help and hoping they'll make decisions in the best interest of the children. They've already made up their mind that you are not in the best interest of the children. And it's almost impossible to get them to acknowledge their mistakes, even when you have a medical report stating clearly that the children are suffering abuse from one party and they are not by the other party and should spend time with the party that is not abusing them. I'd like to thank everyone for their time tonight, and anyone who would like to come on and share your story, please feel free. I'm going to continue to do these Hopefully, I'll have my friend with me next week, and again, we'll be more prepared and have some more information to provide. And uh, I'm just going to keep going because someone who had some knowledge took the time to share it with me, and they made a huge difference in my life. And if I can help somebody out of where I was and help them back to a normal type of life, I've done something, because then they have the ability to help others. That's what we need to do. We need to build our support group. We need to build our network, and we need to support one another to help each other through this process, because it is so damaging to everyone involved. So I'm just going to sign off for tonight. And again, anyone who would like to take part, share their opinions, share their thoughts, please feel free to contact me. Bill Edgett. I'm on Facebook. Uh, just send me a PM or contact me through Dad's Matter too, and we'll try to set up a session, whether you want a private session to just speak with me to talk about your case, or if you'd like to come on and share your situation with everyone else. Thank you everyone for watching tonight, and have a good evening. I'll see everyone next week. Have a good night.